Greetings, friends. Welcome to our podcast for the Presbyterian of James, Innovate, Ignite, and Inspire. I am Dr. Flo Barbee-Watkins, and I serve as your lead presbyter for vision and collaboration. And we have Reverend Leigh Anne Ring, who serves as the presbyter for relational care. This is part 3, so we hope that you've already heard the other 2 podcasts by now. But if not, go back and listen to them because this is good stuff. Reverend Ring is giving us some really, really good information for transformation. And so, welcome again. We are so glad you're here. We're just going to dig in.
Let's do it.
All right. So, boundaries. It's a buzzword.
Mm-hmm.
It's a word that some pastors stay away from, and some pastors have really good boundaries. We've been talking about, how the presbytery can help with care and self-care and promoting good, healthy boundaries. So I want to continue that conversation. So tell our listening audience and our folks, how can the presbytery support pastors in their care of parishioners, educators in their care of children and youth and adults ministries, commission pastors? How can we, us, help them in having good boundaries?
I think an important part is to continue to have it at the top of our things that we're communicating about. Our expectations. So when a pastor comes into the presbytery, they're given our expectations of faithfulness. That shouldn't just be a document that they see once and then they don't see again until they go to a different presbytery. We need to be talking about what boundaries are, talking about this in a podcast, talking about it in a current, writing a newsletter article, just keeping it in front of people, because it's when you stop talking about it that the boundaries get slippery. And so you need to be intentional and focused on what's appropriate. And sometimes you lose track of where you are and you lose track of where the line is. And so that's where that connection piece is going to be so important, that you're connected to a group of colleagues, educators, ruling elders, pastors, people who are doing the same kind of responsibilities as you, so that you can have conversations and sort of get that annual checkup or that biannual checkup or whatever you need in terms of keeping you on track with being responsible. Because boundaries are about understanding that there has to be a line that protects you and protects all of God's people. And you have to acknowledge that line. And sometimes you have to be reminded about that line. And some people are going to be better at it than others. And so there are going to be people in the presbytery that are good cheerleaders for appropriate boundaries. And we take advantage of that energy and enthusiasm and bring them on the podcast and have them talk about what it looks like. And we keep our eyes open for those who are crossing the boundaries and be courageous to speak to those boundary crossings as not okay. And that takes courage. Sometimes that takes a community so that you're not doing that conversation on your own. But if we can't speak to when boundaries are crossed, then we really don't honor any kind of boundary. And so honoring that by speaking up and holding people accountable, not in a way that is looking for them to fail at this, but in a way of supporting success in keeping boundaries. Because boundaries can be serious in terms of protecting our children and our vulnerable people in our congregations, and they can be maybe less critical, like taking a day off or taking a vacation and making some space in your schedule for balance in your life. That's a boundary.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole range of what a good boundary can be for different parts of your life, for your physical and your psychological and your spiritual health. And we need to care and think about all of those. And we need to expect our pastors and educators and leaders to care and think about those as well.
Yeah. That sounds great. And again, I think that part of those boundaries or keeping those boundaries, it makes the system work better. I remember a church consultant that my congregation worked with way back in the day, and she said, if I can train you all to do anything, it will be to take out your own trash. So if you see something, then you don't have to take it to the pastor. You see something, you say something, to that person. And I think that oftentimes what happens is that triangulation that happens. And so that pastor is sitting in that seat and gets triangulated into the system of dysfunction, and it just goes boom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're still in a pandemic.
Yes.
But we're hopefully on the other side of the crisis part, in which every congregation had to do something different. Talk to us a little bit about what something different can look like as a result of the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. Like,
sure.
What can churches begin to look and see differently now that every pastor has become a TV evangelist? You're scanning QR codes to give money in church. Talk to us a little bit about how you envision different being.
Well, I think the opportunity of COVID let us figure out what was most important in the moment, what we had to keep going with doing, and what we had some wiggle space to do with, from what is a communion element all the way down to what does church programming look like. And so I think we've done a lot of learning, but we need to do some reflection on that learning. Don't be so fast. Don't be so fast in trying to go back to where you were 5 years ago. Think about the things that you learned in this time of very different, and spend some time reflecting. And don't do this by yourself. Like, this is not the pastor's job to figure this out. This is the job to do with the whole congregation, maybe the whole region, and certainly within the whole presbytery. Who are we now that we can't even say we're on the other side of COVID. So who are we now in this time of living with COVID? Because I think we're going to be continually living with it. And I do think we need to make some space to mourn the things that we don't have anymore, or that we lost because of COVID. And I think we need to be willing to say that there are some things we don't need to pick back up. There are some programs, there are some traditions, there are some rituals that we don't need to bring back because they make people tired. And if you're looking at the things that you were doing 5 years ago and you think, we've got to get back to that chili bake-off, and nobody wants to do the chili cook-off, then don't do the chili cook-off. Nobody's making you do the chili cook-off, right? I mean, so I think time for reflection, being willing to say, we don't need to pick that up again, and being willing to say, ooh, what could we do now? What could we do now that we know, fill in the blank? And I think in the same way that I want to be listening in this role, I want pastors to be able to be listening to. Listen to your congregation. What are you seeing? If they're tired, we don't need to go back to every night we have something going on in the church. We can look at each other and say, we're tired. Right now we're going to rest. And what does rest look like for a congregation? It doesn't look like you don't have to worship. It does look like what? Fill in the blank. Fill that out for yourself. And this is where I get excited about our continuing education, because there are all kinds of people in this same position all over the denomination who are trying to figure this out. And when you go to a conference, there are great things from the keynote speakers and the workshops. But what I love at the conference most is when I'm sitting across from you and we're waiting for an Uber, and that conversation comes up of, what are you doing about this?
Yeah.
Oh, this is what I'm doing. And we, oh, wow, we hadn't even considered that.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to look at other sources.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to look at sources outside of the church. How is how is the YMCA recovering from COVID? How is, how are restaurants recovering from COVID? What good things did we learn? What things can we hold on to? What things can we let go of? I think that's just an important reflective process.
Awesome. You used a word that I think that we are sometimes afraid to use, which is grief.
Mm-hmm.
Grieving what used to be. And when we think about grief, we think about, death and dying. But I think there is an element of naming what we are grieving.
Mm-hmm.
How can we as Presbytery staff maybe help congregations or facilitate or find someone who can facilitate conversations to talk about the grieving of yesteryears?
Mm-hmm. I think the church does a disservice when it doesn't talk about death and grief, and we only talk about life and joy and peace, because death and grief are a part of this whole cycle that we are called to live into. So I think the presbytery, in the same way that we need to talk about boundaries and being responsible, we also talk about the realities of life. And you can't talk about a reality of life without talking about death. So what things can we create at the presbytery level certainly we can bring in good speakers, but we can also just not be afraid of saying, what are you grieving right now?
Yeah.
What is breaking your heart right now? And let's not fix that in this moment. It's not to say, well, I'm sorry about that, and let's just move on. And you've named it, and therefore it no longer has power over you, because that's not realistic. But creating space and being courageous of saying, what's breaking your heart right now? And then just waiting.
Yeah.
And then just listening. And saying, I feel that pain with you. That's a companionship. We're traveling this together, and it's making space for real. And I think when we make space for this with our pastors, that encourages them to make space with their members of their congregations.
Yeah. That's good. So I have another question. Okay, so the Presbytery of the James is a geographical location inside of the state of Virginia for us. 98 congregations, hundreds of ministers, both active and retired, people who are in validated calls, people who are chaplains at hospitals, prisons, and in the military. Lot of people. And the presbytery is all of us. And we serve as staff to this big thing we call the Presbytery of the James. But when you or I or Barbara or someone from the staff sometimes walks into a congregation, there's this almost a wall that goes up because of the perception that the presbytery is coming in to do something. Have you felt that, experienced that, even when you were beginning as an educator, and even now that you are the bad person now?
That's right.
When you walk in. And how can we begin to debunk that myth that that presbytery only wants to, whatever they think, close their church, take over, have authority over them, make them do something. How do we begin to debunk those myths?
I think the best thing that the three of us can do is just get out there amongst the people, because we have so much fun together, and it's such a joy to be together that that's going to be contagious in our congregations. And when we go in laughing and talking the way we laugh and talk in the office, I mean, stop by the office. It's a great place to stop by. But also, as we get out and about and take that joy out, then I think that debunks the idea that we're this serious rule keeping, you're breaking the rules, that's the only reason why we're here kind of idea of us and them. I do think the strategic planning team and the search team who called the three of us had a lot of wisdom when they created the three positions to allow some freedom for all of us to be able to do all of the things. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have specific job titles and roles, but we're all of it together. Mm-hmm. And so when we're walking in, we're providing whatever they need, that's, whoever is in front of us at that moment. It's not like you're not going to offer relational care and I might never have an idea of a vision or a program, right. But that I think we will model something new and exciting for the presbytery to consider and live into. And I think they will look at us a little bit like, what's going on over there? What are they doing? And then they will want to join in, because it's a great time. And there's a lot of joy in the work of the Lord, in the way that we're designed, and the gifts that we have and that we bring to this position. So I'm delighted that the presbytery has taken this leap and thinking about and expanding the roles of leadership at the presbytery level. And I think we're just going to keep inviting more and more people to the party, and you're just going to want to join in, because it's a great place to be.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, maybe one last final question. Okay. So the Presbyterian Church USA has a new vision for that's leading and guiding us. It's called Matthew 25. It comes from that place in Scripture that talks about, what you've done to the least of these, you've also done unto me. The Presbytery has promoted it for congregations to get involved in dealing with eradicating poverty and eliminating and dealing with structured racism and talking about church vitality. Do you see that as being a way for us to generate mission and ministry and create congregational vitality in our congregations?
I think it's a great way to highlight where we're already vital, and then provide some encouragement to keep doing that work that we're already doing. And I have been doing a lot of preaching in smaller congregations, and I am so excited about the ways that they are living into the vitality of the call to ministry. And I think the more we can share those stories, people want to tell the good news about what is going on in their congregation and in their community, and how excited they are. And if we can offer that kind of opportunity, it's going to be fantastic. Yeah. People are going to want to share that story. And I also think it is our job in the presbytery to be the one shining the light on those who are hungry and thirsty, so that they're not forgotten. And we just need to keep thinking about not just ourselves. I think we need to focus the part of that Matthew 25 that calls out to the responsibility for us as presbyters is keeping that focus on the least of these, the ones whose voices aren't naturally heard, and creating opportunities, creating energy and enthusiasm about doing that important work of ministry. And I think the the leadership model that we have, and just the way we're already working together, that's going to be an exciting piece of our future in the Presbytery of the James.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I don't know about you all, but I have thoroughly enjoyed this interview. It's been amazing. Leigh Anne, thank you so very much for hanging out with us over 3 episodes and talking about your role as the Presbytery for Relational Care and some of what you see as a vision for the future of the Presbytery of the James. I'm just delighted to be your colleague in ministry. I'm glad that God called the 3 of us together to be the 3 presbyters. And I look forward to many, many years to come of helping to embody what Christ and instituted in the church, which is that rock and that foundation, so that men and women, boys and girls, siblings, in this broken and fearful world can know somebody loves them and that they're loved by God and that they're loved by others.
It's life-giving stuff.
Yeah. Any final words for our listeners today?
I'm just excited to be on this team. It's great work. It's important work. It's hard work, and it can be isolating work, but it doesn't need to be. So I guess my last thing is reach out. Reach out and call. There's not a bad call among the 3 of us. That's right. Let us know what you need, and let us know what you're excited about, and let us know how we can accompany you on your journey.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so very much. Hey, everybody, stay tuned because we have more episodes coming. So make certain that you subscribe to this podcast. Again, Leigh Anne and Flo. We're here as part of 2 of the 3. Thank you for listening and stay inspired.